Welcome fellow watch lovers. Today we're looking at the San Martin SN004 limited edition Milsub homage. This has the same case as these BB58 SN004 limited editions. So obviously wanted to show some side-by-sides here. I've already done a review on these two. The case and the bracelet specs are the same. The main difference here is this was an early version of blue release. Has a different crown that doesn't have the hex logo on it, but it does have a 120 click bezel, which is a difference between these other two, which we'll get into. So as I've done a review on the other two, the main area to focus on here are the differences. So the hands and the dials and the bezel insert are different here, as well as the dial material itself. We have an inky black enamel style dial, sword hands. So the bezel insert is ceramic like the other two, but as you'll notice, it does have indices that go all around at every single minute tick. Now the only problem with this is the fact that this is a 90 click bezel, which means that the alignment of each click doesn't match up on every click or every other click. The bezel action is smooth. It doesn't really make any sense for this to be a 90 click bezel. It really should have been a 60 click bezel or a 120 click bezel. That is criticism of the watch. It's because that just doesn't make any logical sense. The Lumina hands and the indices are BGW9 Superluminova. It has a nice blue glow to it, and it lasts a rather long time. Talking about the hands and the bezel insert with the ticks all around, some of the appeal of the watch is kind of harking back to the history here, where this watch is obviously homage, and San Martin hasn't been around that long, but the original maker of this style of watch, the story goes that the military was issued a number of watches in this sub style, and then the military had some critiques on what they wanted to see for improvements. The company actually obliged and made some of those. One was making the hands kind of that sword hand, so you have more distinctive, a little bit more lume. On the hour hand, making the two a little bit more distinct. That story isn't that much different than the story behind snowflake hands and the reason why they did that. Then you also have ticks around at every minute marker for that military styling and timekeeping, so you have more accurate instead of just the first 15 minutes on most sub style watches. And the originals fetch insane amounts of money because of the fact that they are so rare, and this is one of those watches where it can certainly make sense to get an homage if you like that style, because the original manufacturer trying to get your hands on one of those just is completely out of the question for any normal person. So the case sizing is certainly different than that. Now on the original Milsub, you couldn't actually put a bracelet on it because the bars were affixed, and so therefore it really isn't a NATO only model. This one, you can have it on a bracelet, you can take it off and put it on NATOs and all that fun stuff. We have a gear tooth edge around the bezel. It has a good feel to it. It extends just slightly beyond the case, just as the other two homages do. It's primarily brushed around the case as well as the bracelet, except you do have this chamfer here that is polished. We have a hex crown on the side. We do have the hex logo on the dial as well as on the clasp. So matching branding across the board. The clasp is one of my favorite clasps on any watch. I just think these are well executed. The tolerances are done well. It has 4 micro adjustments, and the pushers feel nice and solid. It has the milled clasp. It does not have any easy link extension, but it does, as mentioned before, the 4 micro adjustments. There is polishing on the side of the bracelet, and then the top of the bracelet is brushed to a very nice standard. Side of the case is brushed, and I always appreciate that personally. The back of the case has no engraving and feels nice and smooth against the skin, and has a little sunburst effect with the way that the back of the case was finished. Getting into the specifications of the watch, this is size for my 7.5 inch wrist, and comes in at 139 grams. Case diameter is 39 millimeters of 19.55, which tapers down to 16, and then back up to just over 18 for the clasp without the pushers. The thickness of the watch is about 13.5 millimeters, and we do have that nice domed sapphire crystal that creates some nice, interesting distortions. So this happens to be my favorite case design of any watch that's on the market. I think the proportions are great, the thickness is great, the size is great, fits my wrist well, is very comfortable to wear, and so therefore that's why you can see that I have sort of the multiple versions of this one, and have no intention of removing these from the collection, as these are some of my favorite watches. You'll see the dials on these 2 black ones, and as well as the handles and indices, make them look like very different watches, even though it has the same case. You have deep glossy enamel black dial versus the matte finished black dial, which is less dark. And of course the indice colors and the markers and the pip really just make them look and feel like rather different watches, even though the cases are the same. As long as you're comfortable with the 90-click bezel on this watch, which makes it functionally not quite what it could have been, highly recommend this one. They just came out with some other variations, so if you're into the sword hands, they also now have one with more of the retro looking yellow indices on the dial itself, and I think that one probably uses the C3 Superluminova, so it glows green instead of the blue. And they also released a blue variant version with the sword hands and blue bezel insert, so that's also worthy of your consideration if you're interested in something that isn't the snowflake hands. Well, I hope you found this review helpful, and please like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content.